Around Puerto Rico, we have already seen a few crawler track formations. In Seafloor Archaeology 21, we saw a huge square wave formation which almost filled the Caribbean Sea. In Seafloor Archaeology 22, we saw very regular frame formation and biomechanical formations in the south of Puerto Rico. Now in this Seafloor Archaeology 23, we are going to see more around Puerto Rico. The first thing is another square wave formation in the north of Puerto Rico. This one is much smaller compared to the one filling the Caribbean Sea. Square wave pattern is the most systematic formation of crawler traces, and it can be found in every ocean floor. Compared to that in the Caribbean Sea, it is much smaller. But the square wave pattern here is far more regular and repetitive. Even if this square wave pattern is smaller than that in the Caribbean Sea, it is still huge. It is very difficult for us to realize the gigantic size of crawler patterns because there are very few referential objects on the ocean floor. On the land we have geographically large objects, such as rivers, mountains, forests and cities to compare with. But there are no such familiar objects on the seafloor that will enable us to grasp the gigantic size of such crawler formations. So it is necessary for us to be reminded of the size, that is, real length, real height and real depth every time in order to understand crawler reality. Objective measurement in numbers is indispensable for serious researchers. The measurements made in this video are mostly based on the calculation mechanically done by the tools of Google Earth. If this had been not on the seafloor but on the land, it would have been discovered by humans long time ago. It's so huge and regular it's impossible for any terrestrial intelligent being not to be aware of this awesome topography. Do you agree to that? Yes, most normal people will agree to that. But when it comes to the same topography on the seafloor itself, some people start to say it must be traces of sonar investigation ship. They can't accept the real fact simply because it is far beyond their comprehension. people with low intelligence are incapable of admitting the existence of something they don't understand. They think there should be nothing beyond their understanding. They wish it to be some digital illusion that has no three-dimensional counterpart. So they come up with sonar ship theory, in the hope of sounding high-tech and scientific. In fact, sonar ship theory is no less childish than trawler theory if you look at the lengths or heights of those gigantic topographies. They are so naive that they think one single phrase, digital illusion, can bury the whole crawler realities for good. This square wave formation is partly invisible for unknown reason. Some geological process might have caused this invisibility. The parts which seem to have disappeared are reconstructed only in orange lines. Grid pattern is peeping. Grid pattern is a specially artificial pattern, isn't it? Equidistant parallel lines crisscross at right angles. It is beyond our reasonable doubts that this pattern is the result of intelligent design. And the size is impossibly huge. Can a sonar ship leave such a grid pattern with three-dimensional solidity on the seafloor? Do you seriously think it possible? Just imagine the same thing were on the dry land. Your city would be easily included in this wall box. Your city would be surrounded by 4 high walls like a square fortress. This grid pattern really exists on the seafloor no matter whether you can explain it or not. It is three-dimensional, regular and huge. It must have been made according to some intelligent design. Or do you insist that it was made by natural forces or geological processes? Even if it was made according to some intelligent design, it must have been made by an engineering technology that we can never imagine. At least it looks far beyond the technical capabilities of human beings. It is not a single square, but a repetitive pattern extending more than 100 kilometers. As for the area of this grid pattern, there are 2 possibilities. One is that the area of the grid pattern is only where we can see, although the area looks like peeping through rip and tear. The other is that we are looking at only exposed small part of grid pattern, which actually covers vast area. The first theory, which can be called no hidden part theory, has a weak point. The grid pattern areas are mostly long stretches, but the grid patterns are not parallel with the linear stretches. That is where no hidden part theory sounds unnatural and inconsistent. The second theory, which can be called peeping theory, presupposes underlying vast grid pattern areas, which remain subterranean. The drawback of the second theory is that in spite of its consistency and plausibility, it has no conclusive evidence. We have only a few cases of grid pattern here in this video now because of insufficient research. But there is a growing likelihood that more and more cases of similar patterns will be discovered in other areas on the globe. The more cases of grid patterns we find, the more plausible the second theory, that is, peeping theory, inevitably becomes. Of course, even if cases of grid pattern increase, that won't automatically make peeping theory true at all. Nevertheless, growing number of grid pattern inevitably increases the likelihood of peeping theory being true. Only a few examples of grid pattern are collected hurriedly to show in this video. It is most likely that you can easily discover another case of grid pattern in the vast oceans of this planet. At least dozens of cases will be found in other seafloors. This pattern is very tricky. It's fundamentally different from the previous ones that we've seen. Please look at the grid very carefully. It's a reverse pattern of the previous one. The grid here is not protruding like a Belgian waffle. It's dented like a chocolate bar. Superficially, these contrasting patterns may look the same, but they are structurally quite different. We could say they are as different as positive and negative. But this type of surface reversal is not uncommon with crawler realities. We have already seen such tricky cases in other videos of Seafloor Archaeology. This may suggest how different crawler technology is from ours. But in the same area, there's waffle pattern, too. Two reverse patterns coexist in the same area. One is like a square fortress, and the other is like a square moat. They are very different not only in terms of appearance, but also in terms of building method. But this difference could be very irrelevant from crawler's point of view. And even in terms of building method, the different results might be easily produced by flipping one parameter. This is a variation of chocolate bar pattern. Surrounding moats are so deep that square premises inside become soaring high mounds. We see many high mounds aligned with perfect regularity. look like polyurethane wave sponge. But actual size is more than 1 kilometer by 1.5 kilometers with a height of about 40 meters. We have no such regular topography on the land whatsoever.